I am, very excited to be in conversation with Callahan, who I met, like, I don't know, a week or so back, a couple of weeks back, and has, I believe, a huge amount to offer permaculture. I can share the story about how I came across Clinton's book. It's called Radiant Joy, Brilliant Love. I kind of intercepted it, sent it to David Holmgren, sensing that his work had some sort of resonance and maybe some stuff to offer permaculture. And then I ducked off with it, and I'm yet to give it back to him. But I read the book. I found it incredibly useful, just sort of personally, and just all these new ideas about kind of navigating space and life and moving from standard kind of ordinary relationships, personally, professionally, into the space of extraordinary, and then there's even some stuff beyond that, and I really got a feel of resonance with the stuff around generative transformation or kind of healthy living process that enhances life and beauty and wholeness. Anyway, that inspired me when I found about the training in a 5-day training called Expand the Box in Wellington, New Zealand, to show up to that. Similarly there, I got a lot of value personally as a trainee, and was so delighted to kick off some conversations with you, Clinton, around the resonance and the exciting edges and overlaps between possibility management and permaculture, which you've been developing for roughly a similar time period, right? Like permaculture was kind of developed in the mid to late 70s, and you've been at it for a similar time.
That's right. Yeah.
And to my knowledge, until I came across this book on David Holmgren's coffee table, I'd never heard of possibility management, which is the general name of your approach. And I thought I'd mention too that part of how you talk about your approach is in terms of what you call next culture. This idea that which we can explore perhaps in our chat, that our current mainstream kind of modern culture is comprised mainly of uninitiated children or kind of immature kind of mindsets and activities that are effectively wreaking havoc in all directions, and that a lot more is possible, which resonates so much with permaculture, permanent culture, which is what would a culture that could persist and not screw everything up look like? So already there, it's like ding, ding, ding. Well, maybe before I kind of open it up and to you, I can share that I think it's 2 days ago now, I had this kind of epiphany, which was I was sitting with the canonical definitions of permaculture, which all start with this idea of conscious design, of consciously designing nature-mimicking systems that provide for human needs locally, as well as enhancing local and bioregional ecosystem health, which anyone into permaculture will know that's pretty close to the core, the essence of what permaculture is about. And of course, it starts with these two words: conscious design. And having read some of your stuff and spent time in one of your trainings, I realized how important this word conscious is. And I thought, wow, what a great way to explore how these two approaches, these things you call, in your language, you call game worlds, permaculture being a game world, and possibility management being a game world, how they might intersect. And I thought I'd just share quickly a few flavors of my own work with this word design, and then bring you in with this word conscious. Sound good? Okay. So as listeners of this podcast and followers of the blog will know, I've been really poking around this idea of design. And over time, I've even come to realize that the word design, one issue I've come to have with it is that in a dictionary definition, design is about upfront planning. It's about drawing a picture or a plan, and at some point later implementing it. And so I'm moving towards the word creation, because that's what permaculture is really about, is creating these amazing, abundant, regenerative systems that are good for people and place and all that stuff, where design is sometimes part of that mix. But I'm kind of pushing through the fog of this word design and arriving at this idea of creation, and ideas of related ideas of transformation and generating and moving more to how nature creates itself, as opposed to falling into the culturally dominant default design processes approaches, which are about master planning and prioritizing rationality and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, if we move from design to creation, then we can say, well, permaculture is about conscious creation. And before we even move on to the fact it's what we focus that conscious creation at, what we're creating, there's this word conscious. And a big part of my discovery after inquiring and experimenting and practicing in this domain for over 10 years now is that so much of what I see and have seen in myself and others is I can't say it's conscious creation. It's unconsciously perpetuating, regurgitating, propagating culturally dominant ideas about design and creation, which to me contradict the essence of what permaculture is about, and really make it much harder for permaculture to realize its beautiful gift or its offering in the world. And so, yeah, I thought it would be really exciting today to have you speak to the idea of conscious creation and what that means for you, and we see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you. When you first told me about your realization about how the word conscious is the first part of the description of how permaculture would be presented in a person's mind or in their life or in their work, it's a big thing to think about, that maybe we weren't conscious of using the word conscious when the original intention was to use the word conscious with regards to permaculture. And what happened to that? You know, where has that gone? Like how can something so big and important slip through the fingers of the designers when it's the gateway word to the whole idea of what permaculture could really be about. So in the work that we're doing over here in possibility management, the consciousness is also a big word. And so I don't pretend to have a definition of consciousness, because it's almost like consciousness would be bigger than any definition that you could bring to it. At the same time, I think there's ways to go at this that make real sense and practical sense, particularly with regards to human beings in our predicament right now on the planet, with what's emerging as design errors. I mean, there's so many design errors right now with regards to, for example, using hierarchical power structures in organizations, which are so easily hijacked by the psychopathic agenda, because it's the psychopaths who are most skilled at doing whatever it takes to get a position of power. And so if we submit really all our important decisions, political, scientific, religious, educational, medical, whatever you want to call it, agricultural decisions, to organizations that are designed with a hierarchical power structure, it's a design error. And so how do we approach these things with a more conscious orientation, starting from ourselves, starting from you and me and our people listening and thinking about the stuff we're diving into here. And so I just want to say, a number of permaculture people have been using possibility management for a number of years right now, and there's this resonance between the approach of taking more higher levels of responsibility for things that maybe most people don't realize we can take responsibility for. And so going at it from that way, I think about responsibility as applied consciousness. Like, responsibility itself is consciousness in action. And so here's this word consciousness being brought into practical reality and showing up in ways that empower us to take ownership of and make choice about and take action in domains, and actually source works in domains that other approaches wouldn't allow us to. So if we're doing permaculture and we're using conscious permaculture, it's saying that we can make choices about, take actions with, and source more aware results than we would be if we were not using conscious work. So consciousness then, to me, is really getting to being to mean what are we aware of? And in fact, what are we aware of that we're aware of? So becoming aware of what you're aware of I find that to be an experience, a direct experience of consciousness. So that as I'm working in my daily life, and as I'm working with people and projects and game worlds, as you say, for example, right now I'm talking to you from TUI, which is a conscious community. So all of a sudden the word conscious is there again. Conscious community. It's an intentionally created community of people in the North part of the South Island of New Zealand, called TUI Community. It's been around for 35 years, and the way they implement permaculture here and the way that they've been using the permaculture in the land, we've just started using it in their social organization with the people. So it was a total dive into exactly the conversation we're talking about, which is how do you take the outer permaculture of what people know today of as permaculture, and how do you bring the principles of permaculture in alignment with the principles of conscious community and inner permaculture, the development of a person's inner garden and inner resources, and bring the two together. Because I'm pretty clear about that, having been in a couple of permaculture projects myself, that if you don't work on the inner permaculture of each person involved and of the organization itself and the project itself, the outer permaculture isn't going to persist. It will come apart at the seams for one reason or another. If I plant trees now, who's to say nobody's going to cut them down 25 years from now? Because the inner permaculture is not developed as much as the outer permaculture, that kind of thing. So consciousness is this being aware of what we're aware of and giving us choices about what kind of choices we can make, and opening up a whole domain of inner permaculture in parallel with the outer permaculture that's been developed. And I think it's a fabulously rich domain to dive into and work with. And I think so many people are hungry for this. I think so many people actually enter the area of permaculture seeking and hungry for ways to work with their inner resources in themselves and bring them, activate them in new ways, more conscious ways.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Yeah, and so much is sort of coming up. I'm one of these people who's so hungry for this stuff and so excited. One thing I realized is that it's almost like I might put it in terms of a consciousness blind spot or hazy spot in permaculture, because one thing that permaculture has a great deal of consciousness about, a great deal of awareness about, is the dynamics of healthy ecosystems. I mean, that's a huge part of permaculture's value, I think, and what it brings is a lot of ecological literacy, energy literacy, reading the patterns of nature, all that stuff. And a lot of that I see as awareness around the important aspects, like a lot of permaculture principles are functional descriptions of characteristics of healthy systems. And as you were talking, this just for the listeners, the way Clinton and his collaborators share possibility management is through these things they're called thought maps. So I might just refer to when you shared this map, just so you know what I mean. The thought maps, and each thought map shares one very clear, I'd almost say, well, I wouldn't almost say, I will say piercingly clear distinction, which you then get to try out and experience inside your own internal ecology. One of the maps you presented was what you called the map of new results. The idea being that if you want a different result, you need to take different actions. And then there's a sort of chain. If you want different actions, you need to make different decisions and so on. And it kind of came back to you need different, what you call thoughtware. You basically make a different sort of set of assumptions and ideas and processes. And my work I'm always open to conversation about this, but what I've found in myself and in permaculture in general, going through the literature and practicing and talking and having all these conversations as a podcast, is that there's a relatively the ecological literacy, the literacy about healthy nature mimicking outcomes is off the charts in permaculture. The literacy around the dynamics of processes that are reliably able to generate that kind of stuff, there's a relative lack of process literacy there. And often I also think that the focus on kind of outer ecological outcomes, as great as it is, it can not so distract us, but what excites me about your work is that it's so damned general, like this idea of conscious creation inside, outside, in any context at all, where it's the nature of the process you use, and like you say, how aware you are of the process that lets you get better at the process, and then you can point this thing in any direction. And whether it's a eco-village or a intentional community, or even a permaculture garden, or whatever scale, or in my own experience, I'm realizing, holy shit, the same stuff as I become more process literate and more aware of what I'm focusing on and what's going on and what that means for the outcomes. This stuff applies 100% as equally to my relationship with my wife and my children, and my relationship to my process of cooking dinner, or laying out my living room. That was a crazy kind of epiphany for me several years ago. I was like, holy shit, this is not about designing ecological systems anymore. It's the more I go into that, the more general this gets. One colleague I was thinking of as you're talking to was Dave Jackie, who would be amazing for you guys to connect if you haven't already. But he's very much about becoming the same stuff, about more conscious of process. I remember one time him saying to me, he tries to pay attention to what's going on in his awareness as a process is unfolding. One time he said, I try and catch myself making a key design decision. He sees it coming, and it's like this little blackout, and then he's looking back at it, and he's trying to get better at actually noticing these moments, which I've found the work I've done with you and what I've learned from you is so much about that, just becoming really clear and aware of the dynamics of what's going on right now inside me, and what that means for what happens next. Yeah.
There's this, using the word conscious, it implies something, a final state, or if I'm conscious of something, then that's as conscious as I can be about it, for example, or that there is a state of consciousness that you can achieve that is the final state of consciousness about anything in particular. And I don't think that's true. I think I don't actually know how it works, but I think consciousness is some kind of a fractal thing where I get a little bit of consciousness here, but there's a much higher resolution of consciousness about the same thing that I can have. And it blows me away if I look back in my life and see what I've learned about that I didn't know about. It just blows me away, even though at the time, back then, I thought I was a hotshot. I thought I had it together. I thought I understood things. I thought things were really working, and in fact, if I could only go back there with what I know now, okay, well, 5 years from now, I'm going to think the same thing about this moment. And so I think that's one of the hidden insights about consciousness, is that it's in flux, or it evolves, or it's possible to become more and more conscious. And I don't think there's a top end. I really don't think there's a top end. And I think that's bothersome for the Western mind, because we want to think that there is a top end, there is a set level of consciousness. And the thing about the evolution of consciousness is the evolution part, which is, okay, here I am, I've got this awareness, I have this understanding, I see things as I see them, and it is like it is. And then all of a sudden, the rug is pulled out, and I'm falling in a spaciousness of a vaster consciousness or more awareness, where I don't know the limits of it right now. So I have no reference points. I don't know where I am or how it's going or what happens next. And I'm in it's liquid state. I call it a liquid state, where things are reordering both inside me and around me, so that my relationship to my projects and my work and the people is in a shift state. And that liquid state we're not trained for that in or in a Western world. We're not trained for that. And you can look at plants and you can see them go through, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. You can see them go through these cycles. But I don't think we've included that in ourselves, because you can go through a winter, spring, summer, fall, winter cycle in a matter of a few minutes when you realize something new. But the dissolution state, the composting state, the state of going back into becoming fertilizer for yourself, out of which the next thing emerges and grows. We're not trained in that, and I think it's crucial oversight. I think that's such an integral part of consciousness and the evolution of consciousness, that if we don't start doing that right away, we're stuck. This is really, I think, a big stuck place.
Yeah, totally. As you're talking, like a plant going through the cycles, I'm thinking of a metaphor I often use, which is around like an acorn, right? To germinate and grow, the shell has to crack, and this evolution and consciousness, consciousness, awareness of our inner workings of our processes, that we're constantly developing shells, which are really useful because they support and hold the process that needs to happen then to happen, like the cocoon of the butterfly that's yet to happen. But at some point, their job is to crack and fall away and to become fertilizer. And as I hadn't made as clear the connection with that. That's exactly my experience of doing the work. I have a little bit. I'm noticing a bit of frustration for some listeners. I'm just like, Jesus, I just want you to come along to these bloody experiences, because we're talking about them. That's great, and you can think about it. But and as you explain, you like to present these ideas so the mind can grasp them, such that when you go into the experience and your mind is freaking out because somewhere you haven't been before, and shells are cracking, and in a sense, all hell is breaking loose inside. Your mind can say, oh well, they just explained that this is okay, and that kind of thing. But yeah, and you mentioned the idea of or another one of your maps, which you brought in from somewhere else, but was this progression from unconscious incompetence, and it relates so much to my own journey with permaculture design, because initially I was unconscious that the process I was using professionally, personally, it had become incompetent. And then I slowly realized, oh, right, I'm aware of the fact that I'm using these process dynamics, with stuff I'd learned about rationally dominant, master planning, finish your design, then start your implementation, all this kind of stuff. I was effectively selling pretty pictures to clients. Here's your master plan, here's your invoice. I became conscious that was an incompetent process in terms of really achieving what I want to achieve in the world. And then you go through that phase of so what you're unconscious, you're incompetent. You become conscious, you're incompetent, which is a shell cracking experience. You go into a liquid state. It's part of you wants to say, I'll just forget that. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing because that was safe and reliable and it paid the bills. I got to the point where the crack was wide enough that it was just like, nah, it's got to fall away. And then you become, you become conscious of your competence or your increasing competence, even though it's a endless evolution, and then eventually unconsciously competent. And again, this new kind of layer of working and being in process becomes unconscious, which lays the ground, and I guess over time ossifies and rigidifies into another shell for the next round. Yeah.
There's a trick there, which is to not let it ossify.
Okay.
And really for that, it requires, in my experience, a kind of a support team or a group of people who can be like the background or the support, so that as soon as you get to this unconscious competence where the new skills, the new perceptions, the new abilities become who you are, they're like integrated, you work them without even thinking about it, you move in the new ways. When that happens, the team around you says, okay, time for the next breakthrough. And there's no real time for things to solidify. You just keep in the flow. And that's why we call this learning spiral, is you just keep moving along. But without the other team, I know people who make it to the unconscious competence in one area and then solidify a reputation or copyright a process or a method and think, that they've achieved something that is going to last them the rest of their lives. And I think if we looked around, we could basically agree that the background purpose of the universe is evolution. And so if we have a part of us inside of ourselves that's able to evolve, but it's defended by this structure that we build around ourselves, the acorn shell, if we ossify into this defensive position, the universe is going to just eventually get pissed off, because it wants the organic being part of ourselves, the thing that can evolve, to evolve, and it's just going to hammer us with some kind of a, like you said, a new crack. And when the universe has to hammer us to make a crack, it costs us our bank account or a marriage or a leg or whatever. It costs us something really big. So I think in a way permaculture itself may have ossified to some degree, may have solidified itself as a defensive position against the evolutionary process. And what if you do that in kindergarten? What if you do that in kindergarten and there's so much more to learn and unfold and that could come out of there? It's really detrimental to the genius, the original genius behind permaculture. Because it's pure genius, it was brilliant. It's an original invention out of nothing. It had so much of and then to come into a defensive, maybe even crystallized positions of territoriality. This is the way to do this. This is the way to do that. This is the finished product of permaculture. I don't think that's a healthy state. I don't think that's the way. And you can only do that if you eliminate the word consciousness from the formation of what permaculture is. And when you add consciousness back in, it's going to take the thing into a liquid state. It's going to melt it down into this flow again. And this is on the one hand really scary, and on the other hand, what the most wonderful thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, it's so beautifully articulated. And because I've in the last few years, I'm just getting, I'm kind of cautious guy and a little sensitive to criticism, but I've been pointing out some of these cracks and copping remarkably little flack, even though that is there. And I'm actually, in some ways, I'm happy at there. I'm happy that, to me, and sometimes I think, oh, great, at least I want some evidence that permaculture's immune system is still intact. Because of course, you don't just want anyone to come along and just sort of shift the whole thing. So some defensiveness is, I'm kind of glad to have a bit of that. But the vast majority of the responses, because making permaculture stronger is all about this. Like I think as I've expressed to you and others, I call me crazy, but I genuinely believe that right now permaculture is having an existential crisis that it's largely unconscious of. And that it's standing at a fork in the path, and it has a decision to make, and the decision is adapt or die. And the adaptation is around, liquefying and loosening up and bringing out into conscious awareness again our process understandings, and collaborating and getting really excited about evolving those, and kind of having a laugh about the fact, like, how the hell did this happen? How did this fall off the table? Because it's so core and crucial to what permaculture is all about. And to me, it's permaculture's potential, as David Holmgren said at a talk in April last year, that part of what permaculture is about and includes is all these great things, all these great outcomes, ways of techniques and strategies for doing stuff on the land and laying things out, which the rest of the culture, the larger culture that permaculture sits within, it can check out, and it can pluck out the ones it likes and take them in different directions, and it leaves behind the failures, because part of what permaculture is an experiment. Let's find out what works and doesn't work before we don't have that luxury. But, so I said, well, if that's what we think permaculture is, then what does permaculture get left with? The stuff that didn't work, as opposed to the thing that can't really be copy and pasted, which is healthy process, conscious process. And I mean, I know so many listeners will be saying, hell yes. Like, I just talk to so many people that are starving, hungry for this kind of stuff. And I think you're exactly right that along the way, there was some sort of ossification, and that critical part of permaculture's agenda and what it's all about has fallen off the radar. And in my collaborations with David Holmgren, the surviving of the two co-founders of permaculture, I've been kind of shocked and amazed that he explored a lot of the same territory 35 years ago or something.
Whoa.
yeah, he was introduced to something called strategic planning by one of his second great mentor, Hakai Tani, and that was all about kind of transformative, iterative, deep immersion. It was about getting away from all the master planning stuff. And David, at the time when he saw, I guess, the ossification start, or one thing he saw was design process solutions coming in from outside permaculture that didn't really match with what it was all about. And in a sense, I mean, I'm pretty sure the way he's put it, I don't know if I'd say he gave up, but he really struggled to get that point across. And it's only in recent years that he's really starting to speak out about this again. And another thing that he shared to me that's so relevant is that David is a master at reading landscape. So he is. I mean, I'm getting footage and writing what I see. I like to watch him. I like to observe. One of my hobbies is observing him observe landscape, and it's just incredible to see him unpacking a landscape and taking little indicators. And wow. One thing he said though is that when I feed back what I'm seeing him do, is that it's helped him increase his consciousness, his awareness of what he's doing, because he's struggled in the past also to teach reading landscape to others. Because of course, when he's reading landscape, his focus is on the landscape, not on what he's doing to read landscape. And so one thing that I just feel so grateful for, and it's a big part of why I'm still so excited to be part of permaculture, is David's just his humility. And yeah, like we don't have it all sewn up, and I'm excited to be learning more about what I'm doing when I'm in a healthy process. And so to me, that bodes so well for, well, permaculture choosing the the grow and adapt and evolve juncture. And I mean, let me state this as a prediction. I believe that possibility management has a really exciting, crucial contribution to make to this whole conversation. So I predict that, say, 5 years from now, or in the coming years, that permaculturists will be hearing this phrase more often, and that there's going to be some really exciting synergies emerging. And I guess this conversation right now is part of contributing to that, seeding that, which is a deep honor to be part of.
Yeah, I was while you were talking, I was realizing how consciousness is a field, and the evolution process of letting go of the current defended knowingness about what is, about, for example, permaculture. One hopes, or one would think, in our human condition, we would think, well, if I'm going to change, is in the design, I need to have a vision of the design. I need to know the outcome of the design. I need to kind of predict where this is going to go. And that all of those are completely excluded in the domain of evolution. Evolution is called evolution because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You cannot know what the outcome will be. And this is scary. This is scary stuff. It's like, and well, it's thrilling also. I mean, it's exciting also. And there's this field effect of consciousness. What I've found since I started radically relying on the field of consciousness to support the evolution of our own work in possibility management, and I think the same thing can happen in permaculture, that we can start to radically rely on the intelligence of the field of consciousness to guide the evolution, even though we have no idea of what the outcome will look like. And what that means is taking apart the thing and letting the pieces go in flux with each other, in relationship with each other, without already having some design concept of where we're headed for. Because the intelligence that I've found is so far vaster than what I could imagine an outcome of the design to be. It's far more intelligent, complex, sophisticated, elegant, beautiful, and efficient and effective than I could even imagine in my biggest, brightest moments. It just blows my mind over and over again. But it requires this letting go of the grip on the known. In modern culture, hammers in us through its educational systems and its constructs how important knowing is. One of the worst possible things you can say is, I don't know. Or one of the worst possible experiences, not knowing already the answer to what the teacher is going to call on us to have. If we don't know the answer to that already, we're in deep shit. So like this is hammered into us at a very deep, almost cellular, nervous level, having to know, and it's so contradictory to the evolution of consciousness. And so to use and to surf on, or to fly with, or to float in the intelligence of this field of consciousness with regards to inner and outer permaculture work is, I think it's such a huge possibility. It's such a huge, and at the same time, it requires a new set of skills. It's almost like we're designed to fly, and we've been trained to crawl on our bellies in a way. And it's like, okay, what are we talking about here? Well, there's a way that our inner experience. I don't know, maybe, I don't know how it is for you, but in my relationships with other people, I keep thinking I understand how things go. And so, for example, in a group, in a team, permaculture is not done one person at a time. Permaculture is done in groups and teams and projects. So there's this field of the project, and it has more intelligence than the individual participants. And so relying on that field to evolve the consciousness of the people as fast as is necessary to evolve the consciousness of the project in the sophistication and elegance. This is a whole new set of skills, and I think that's where we're going with this.
Oh, so much so. My spine's been tingling. Oh yeah, that's great. Like I mentioned Yasha Raw, a German colleague, and he's been on the same journey. He realized some decade or two back that permaculture didn't have the process solutions he was striving for. So he's evolved what he calls the field process model, and he has a really distinction I love between what he calls procedures and processes, or procedure and process. And he says you pull in, you need both, or you need procedures, and hopefully they'll get you to process. But he described procedures as like you put your surfboard on the car and you drive to the gas station, you drive to the ocean, and you're paddling out. These are all procedures. At some point, all going well, you catch a wave, and then the process starts. And for him, how he talks about it is in terms of a field, is that your job is to immerse. He calls it emergence, which later the emergence happens. But you immerse, and your job is to achieve a state of what he calls field intuition or field resonance. And for me, along with what you've just said, that's been just the most exciting part of my journey as a permaculture designer, is to move from being the expert designer whose job is to think of clever things and impose them on the site, which is what we're trained to do culturally. And I think that's probably a big part of this, what it means to be crawling rather than flying, and learning to trust and honor healthy process and the intelligence of the kind of greater intelligence of all the different people and the plants, the immersing in the field of the whole system, and instead the process, rather than being kind of a microcosm or a new iteration of really imposition, which is kind of colonial imperial stuff. It's like basically plonk something on the site from outside. You should do this because I thought I'm going to draw it on a piece of paper and then impose it. Flipping that totally upside down, and how does the process become like a gateway or a portal through which these, like you say, this insanely beautiful, alive, whole, perfectly adapted solutions can emerge, where the feeling is, I can't remember where I heard this quote from someone, but they said, the feeling of a life fully lived is like a continuous free fall into the unknown. It's like, all you can do is be here now and nourish and support the conditions for the right thing to emerge now, the best step to take now. And you take it, and then the whole field is, it sends a ripple through the field. It's a different field now. And realizing how much time we spend generally, myself anyway, culturally, and then as a permaculturally, is playing around, going into the future with our minds, and I used to say, okay, so this is where you'll be in 10 years. So I'm going to draw you a picture of where everything will be in 10 years, and how every moment you spend 10 years from now, or 1 year from now, or 10 minutes from now, every second you spend there is a second you're not here. You're not present to what's going on right now. And we can never predict how things, well, that would be terrible if we could, right?
Mm,
But even if we, well, I mean, I don't think it's even possible. And so what does this mean for, and like you say, it doesn't matter if it's architecture or permaculture or group relationships or eco villages. I totally hear you. It's exciting
mhm,
to hear you languaging it in your own way.
mhm. Yeah, I think it's important for everybody to understand that not everybody needs to be an expert or master of process for the entire permaculture system, for example, to benefit from it. It's almost like if you think about a jumbo jet going over from London to New York, not everybody needs to be a pilot. So, a few pilots and crew and staff can actually get this whole thing to shift from one continent to another continent. And it's one of the specialty skills, I think, within permaculture, like the evolution and transformation part of the permaculture game world needs to blossom, basically. And it doesn't mean everybody, we still need the research. We still need the basic research and the fundamentals, and then we still need the procedures. Like you said, we definitely need the procedures and the ways that it goes. And between the two is these evolutionary process steps and guiding processes through the liquid state, the falling apart state, and the reordering states, and calling in the forces of the consciousness and awareness, and the outcome, like when a thing starts coming together into new outcomes, documenting that, making it communicating that, and bringing it into the practical parts, like that whole middle stage of the process part is a set of specialty skills that not everybody in permaculture needs to have, but it somehow needs to be included, needs to be integral into the whole game world of permaculture, that when process is needed, the process navigators need to be there and like take the thing apart, pull the thread out. The thing needs to fall into its components and reorder themselves, and things fall away, new stuff comes in, new possibilities emerge, and then it kind of flies out again. And that's this ongoing thing. And so, but it's, if people in the permaculture right now look at themselves and go, hey, well, I don't really have the process navigation skills. I'm not a process wizard. I haven't spent 30, 40, 50 years finding those tools and skills and thought maps, like you said, and processes and models. It doesn't mean they don't exist, because they do. That's what I'm saying. And so that's where I see this a positive outcome of the integration of, for example, things like possibility management coming in and playing their role in the emergence of, like, the death and resurrection show of permaculture as it goes through this, like you said, this choice point. And I imagine not everybody's going to make the same choice. And permaculture is already splintered into a number of different philosophies or something like that. But the ones who make the choice point to include the process part of permaculture and also the inner process part of permaculture, so you have inner permaculture and outer permaculture as part of the game world. I think it's just, if I was to estimate 5 years from now, they'll be more thriving. It'll be the more thriving part and the more exciting part and attractive and nutritious and inspirational part, the one that's really taking off into new territory.
Yeah, no, well put. That's great. Yeah, I was, as you're talking about, because as I've mentioned to you in some of our chats, one phenomenon I've noticed in permaculture is it's a kind of splintering, in the sense that somewhere along the way someone realized, permaculture, there's nothing that's been really applying permaculture to finances, so let's do some stuff on financial permaculture, let's do some stuff on spiritual permaculture, or there's movements within permaculture around women's permaculture, creating kind of healthy spaces for these different aspects of I guess you could say, the broader permaculture agenda. And a concern I've had is as wonderful and important as that is. I mean, I talked to someone yesterday who's doing some work to start the global community or group around permaculture, and health in the healthcare profession and so on.
Mhm.
My concern is that, yeah, and as you're talking, I realize, oh yeah, it's almost like, because the thing is, all of those things involve process,
Mhm.
and if our process literacy is low, or we're not, or the consciousness is not particularly high, what we're going to be taking with us from the permaculture kind of mainstream into all those little pockets is the
Yeah.
same issues, you know. So it's like the Hydra situation. The thing is splitting, and in the past, I haven't. I like your way of thinking. It's almost like one of those things, and the core one is the permaculture process kind of people or group, and like you say, not everyone, that's not going to be everyone's thing, and that would be a problem if it was everyone's thing. But that is appreciated as a critical part of the bigger picture, and that all of these different bits and pieces are somehow in communication with that, and it's not all these separate conversations where people are, well, I believe down the track, if all these bits and pieces evolve in a healthy way, they're effectively going to be making the same discoveries in their own way. So let's
Mm.
reduce the extent, the need to invent the wheel, and be careful to, you know, the problematic stuff that we might be taking along with all the good stuff when we go off in this direction or that direction. One thing I was going to mention actually too was one thing I was really appreciating when I was paying attention to possibility management, and I mean, it's early days for me, but I'm fascinated by the dynamics of these kinds of things. And I really did have a sense that whether or not it was ever at a fork in the path, that it just has this aliveness to it, and the maps, the experiments, everything, it really does feel like it's honoring evolution, and things are shifting and changing, and like dealing with yourself. There's just, I didn't pick up any dogma or any, you know, and I figured this out 20 years ago, so that's how it is. Where I'm conscious in permaculture, well, I know there's room for improvement there. That some of the stuff that C.P. Mollison and David Holmgren laid out sometimes is sort of uncritically
Mhm.
accepted. I mean, a lot of it's, as you said, genius, amazing, brilliant stuff, but they're still humans, they're still mortals, and of course it can be improved, right? Like anything can be improved. Nothing's finished and perfect. That's part of the whole point of how nature works and evolution works. And I know that David sometimes has had concerns about the extent to which even some of his ideas are you know, he wants people to be criticizing, and
Mhm.
you know, not just purely criticizing, but healthy self-critical reflection as part of the evolution. Where that's all that stuff, like all the foundational understandings, aren't just outsourced to the founders or a small group of kind of elites or something. That it's decentralized, it's
Mhm.
de-hierarchicalized, and we can all take ownership of participating in permaculture's evolution, rather than some people are kind of generating the stuff and other people are consumers or recipients. You know, because that's not how nature rolls.
Yeah, at the same time, the ones who go first are almost perceived as enemies. It's like this imaginal cell model, you know, as the caterpillar changes into the butterfly, that paste state, the first cells that start reforming into the new shape are attacked as foreign bodies to the original design. And so, but you said, and which is fortunate, that you haven't been attacked for making some proposals in the recent past. So I suppose you can keep going making these proposals. And but I think it's really healthy for people to remember that if something has appeared to work, that we have this human tendency to grip onto it, you know, and go, okay, this is the way, or this is the procedure, or this works, and so don't rock the boat. You know, don't go off and try something new, because why bother? I mean, this is so far working. And then when you take the bigger picture of for example, permaculture, um, is it working? The rapid monoculturization of the planet's agricultural systems, and the rapid degradation of the diversity of ecosystems, and the fact that permaculture hasn't taken over, for example, governments, you know, who are of these huge militaries, and they're still fighting against each other over oil, which is a limited resource that we're burning as fast as possible. I mean, there's a lot of, you could say, insanity involved in the current systems that are obviously limited in their future is limited. their best of used by date is past. And so there's ways that permaculture could have, should have, has not yet permeated into mainstream cultures, structures, and things that need new vitality. They need a complete regeneration into a whole other context and a whole other format. I call it next culture. I call it the culture that comes after matriarchy and patriarchy. I call it archiarchy. It's this emergence into regenerative and sustainable. I mean, it emerges into a better form of permaculture that involves both inner and outer. And that whoever goes first is easily attackable, or can be considered a wild card or a dangerous element, or somebody who's off the track or who's lost it, or however you want to say it. It's easy to try to undermine and attack the people who are trying new things first. And on the same hand, those are also, leaders are the ones who go first. Leaders aren't the ones who have control. Leaders are simply the ones who go first. And the early adopters will be the ones listening to your show probably, and carrying, like trying to go, okay, trying to wrap their minds around something that you're saying you can't actually wrap your mind around. If consciousness is bigger than your mind, how are you going to wrap your mind around consciousness? And yet consciousness is the theme of where we need to go with this.
Yeah, totally. Wow. Is one thing when you're talking about invigorating, permaculture? I had this image come up of at the least possibility management being like a really kick-ass green smoothie or something. Permaculture couldn't hurt to take a hit of, some pretty amazing micro and macronutrients in there, and just quite amazing combinations. Yeah, wow. I was also thinking, we haven't talked to this about it, and this probably isn't the time, but one of the things that I think is part of permaculture's reinvigoration and healthy evolution is really cracking open this whole thing around, firstly, the simplistic dichotomy of feelings and intuition and intelligence, let's say, or logic and feelings, and work, because the thing being that often it's presented as a dichotomy culturally. So I'm constantly confronted by people that say, well, this is how I work intellectually, rationally, and some of the contexts I work in, like development contexts, if I say, have you thought about, or have you done anything around how it would feel to walk down the street or through this space? That's just off the radar. It's I think perceived as, Christopher Alexander spent a lot of time exploring, it's perceived as subjective, a subjective distraction. Like there's no time for intuition and feeling here. This is about rational, scientific, logical progress. We've got a building to build, or whatever, or whatever. And one of the things I'm so excited and grateful to have picked up from my work with you so far is this idea that how I think of it is, feelings aren't random. They're not some random accident that are just kind of in the way, and our job is to repress them and get them to one side so we can get on with saving the planet or whatever the case may be, whatever our kick is. That they're this phenomenally powerful, useful resource that we're born to be connected with and to use and to channel and to listen to. And I guess I just wanted to float that, because I know a lot of people out there struggle with this stuff, and sometimes it's like, oh, you bring the logic, I'll bring the feeling, whereas we're all built to have that dichotomy dissolve into the wholeness, the larger being that we are, and they're all there to play together. And of course there's other things as well that I've learned about from you, in addition to that, where I'm starting to realize, for me, what I mean by holistic design or holistic decision making is literally honoring the wholeness of who we are as individuals and groups, and that brings a whole new perspective on design process in terms of honoring feelings, honoring intelligence, honoring the whole shebang.
Yeah, because most of us have been brought up in a westernized education system, and starting with even grade school and high school and then university and postgraduate work. it all has this intellectually oriented verbal reality context, and where we're actually doing defensive learning, which is we're only able to learn about things that we already know about, and we build a knowledge continent with these pieces of information. If something doesn't fit onto the already existing kind of group, you say the average intelligence, if it doesn't fit into that, it's invisible, or it's thought to be meaningless or useless. But what we've been finding in our 40 years of research and possibility management is that there are huge inner and outer resources that a human being has to use in their design work, in their creation work. The conscious creation work is huge inner and outer resources that modern culture knows nothing about, and cannot, of course, initiate us into tapping into, preparing ourselves to tap into, and tapping into these resources that are both inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. And this is all part of the permaculture world. It's all part of it that needs to be. It needs, those resources are, as you said, they're elementary and fundamental to the successful emergence of the new permaculture, or inner permaculture and outer permaculture working together through the process of it. Those resources are needed, and they're not so elementary as just simple feelings. There's extraordinary and archetypal resources available to us. And we're designed for this. Like I said, it's actually designed in part of our potential, that the intelligences of which are being left behind at the moment. And they're the opposite of boring. They're immensely intelligent, immensely inspiring, immensely bring huge passion to our life and work that was not obvious before, completely not obvious before, and yet totally available. This is exciting stuff.
Yeah, I was that 5-day training I did with you. I'd say that was or among the 2 or 3 least boring things I've done in my life. and for me, and I was doing my best kind of by myself to figure out some of these things. But yeah, I felt like I was working with the tip of what I now realize is this incredible iceberg, and just the resources we have available within us and all around us that we're born to have access to, and how that involves kind of growing up, maturing, and how part of where you're coming from is that we were built to sort of be initiated into adulthood from children at around age 18, and that all those processes by and large have fallen to the wayside, and so we can go through life being uninitiated children, where we're not initiated into accessing these incredible resources that are at our disposal. And the other side of it being, you have this thing where you move beyond win-lose, and you win-win. You keep going beyond win-win to what you call winning happening. But that it's good. It's good in every direction. So I'm acknowledging that I've still got a lot of growing up to do. I feel like I'm kind of, in a sense, exploring authentic adulthood for the first time, and exciting. And it's really good for me. It's incredible for my relationships, for my marriage, for my being a dad. It's phenomenal for the value I can bring to my design clients and processes. And of course, it's good for the landscapes. It's just good in all directions. There's no downside. And so you just kind of wonder, well, Jesus, I try not to think too much about the fact it's taken me. I'm 44. And I'm starting to grow up, but so be it. And I'm excited that, well, at least it wasn't 60 or 80 or, it never happened.
Yeah, exactly. Your listeners should know that even though I sound like an American, I moved out of America in 1995. I was born there, but I moved out in 95 to Europe. And I now don't have an American passport anymore. I have a German passport. And the possibility management was not invented until I was outside of America. So it was actually so the stuff that I'm talking about did not come from America. It's not an American thing. It puts people off to think of it as an American thing, but it's not. It came from Europe. It could only happen when I was outside of the morphogenetic field of America. could become more myself. And so, and the other exciting thing is that there's people in Australia who are calling possibility management into around Melbourne and Sydney. There's some trainers coming in even in March. It's possible to find Expand the Box trainings happening in Australia in March, I'm pretty sure. Just it's easy to Google and find that information. But it's available if people want to find out more about it experientially themselves. So that would be great for people to realize and make use of as a resource.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of reaching the conclusion that when I'm considering serious ongoing collaborations with other people, if they can go to one of these Expand the Box trainings, just the potential of the whole thing is off the charts. And I'm looking forward to continuing with some of the kind of, there's these things called possibility labs that you can continue on with. Yeah, I've been thinking about how I talk about it to people, because on the one hand, I can't recommend it enough. On the other hand, don't come back and tell me, the way it works is this 5-day training, the way it started was, there was sort of an intellectual survey of the territory we'd cover. And then there was a decision to be made, which was the blue or the red pill. Do you stick around? And as you said it, and I'll never forget this, if you stick around, we cannot protect you from transformation.
Right.
So, okay. We'll see what happens. And transformation happened, deep, experiential, powerful, liquid state transformation, falling into the unknown, a whole lot of feelings that I hadn't really accessed before, and certainly hadn't had the relationship where I can now start calling them in as resources. So it's true that I can't recommend it enough, but be warned. This is the opposite of boring. This is what I call authentically transformative. And I check things out, and so it's got my gratitude and approval, and I'll certainly link to everything that's happening in New Zealand, Australia, and all that kind of stuff, and invite anyone out there who's already been exploring these overlaps between possibility management and permaculture. Please get in touch. Let's hook up and explore, because I'll certainly be doing what I can to facilitate this conversation. It's just so resonant with what I know permaculture so kind of deeply needs to continue to thrive and evolve and realize its incredible potential and really express its essence, its beautiful essence, its foundational ethics and principles and all that stuff. It needs a little help from its friends. Yeah. Well, I guess we're about out of time, Clinton. Thanks so much for your work, for existing, for sending that book to David Holmgren at just the right time so I could snatch it off his coffee table, and feel so much less alone in this work, and supported to grow and evolve and get better at being part of all this. And I can't wait to stay connected and see where it all goes from here.
All right, Dan. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Done.